federal food alert this spring stunned even industry insiders. More than 64,000 pounds of what Americans thought was pure butter had to be yanked from warehouses because the label hid the truth about its ingredients. In the same weeks, inspectors found bacterial indicators of fecal contamination inside a premium butter sold as extra creamy. Prices are climbing, ingredients are changing, and the rules that are supposed to protect you are full of holes. What looks like a simple stick of butter has become a perfect hiding place for cheap oils, mislabeled allergens, and production shortcuts that regulators only catch after the fact. Corporations know nostalgia will keep shoppers loyal while they quietly alter recipes and sourcing. Behind the glossy packaging is a supply chain optimized for profit, not your health or your wallet. If the butter on your kitchen counter isn't what you think it is, how many other things aren't either? Stay with this video because we are about to expose 5 of the biggest butter brands you should avoid and reveal 2 that still deserve your trust. Number 1. Land O'Lakes. Land O'Lakes used to be a quiet presence in the fridge. Familiar, harmless, the kind of product you'd grab without thinking, without checking the label, without questioning the price. But that's exactly what makes it dangerous now. In the last 12 months, online food safety forums and consumer complaint boards have seen a noticeable uptick in whispers about this iconic brand. Something about the way it melts, the smell when it hits the pan, a consistency that doesn't match the word butter anymore. And when you start looking into the details, the cracks begin to show. Several buyers have reported packages that liquefy within minutes at room temperature. Others say their pan smells burnt before the toast even hits. These aren't isolated gripes. They're data points from across the country. And while the USDA hasn't issued a public recall, the sheer number of complaints has raised eyebrows in places that matter. Land O'Lakes isn't a mom-and-pop operation. It's a massive agricultural cooperative with annual revenues crossing $14 billion. That kind of scale means decisions aren't made in kitchens, they're made in boardrooms. And when margins get tight, corners get cut. In recent years, the brand has quietly shifted parts of its production and sourcing. Some batches now rely on butter blends, a term that sounds innocent until you dig into what it actually means. Canola oil, palm oil, modified milk ingredients. Words that blur the line between dairy and filler, words that make shelf life easier, shipping cheaper, and the product less like butter and more like a chemically stable spread. But that's not what's on the label. The average American consumer is now paying between $6 to $8 per pound for butter depending on region. With that kind of price tag, people expect clarity, quality, and accountability. Instead, what they're getting is a product wrapped in heritage but pumped through the same industrial shortcuts as lower-tier store brands. And the problem doesn't stop at one package. When a brand as big as Land O'Lakes makes a change, it ripples across the supply chain. Wholesale buyers adjust accordingly. Smaller co-ops follow suit. Retailers lower standards to match price points. And within a few short months, what once counted as premium butter becomes just another processed product wearing a familiar face. Meanwhile, policy loopholes in FDA labeling rules allow for wiggle room. Companies don't have to say exactly how much of the product is made with actual cream. They're allowed to mask cheap oils under natural flavorings. And if the texture holds up and no one gets hospitalized, most regulators look the other way. This is how it happens. Not in big scandals, but in small shifts. Not with dramatic lawsuits, but with silent compliance. And yet people keep buying it. Not because they love it, but because they remember it. That's the real manipulation. Nostalgia weaponized by marketing. The bigger question now isn't whether Land O'Lakes is still worth your money. It's whether it was ever really butter to begin with. Number 2. Bunge. Bunge is not a brand most people recognize on the shelf, yet its reach is enormous. It supplies and packages for names you do know, sliding into grocery chains from coast to coast. In the summer of 2025, the company quietly pulled more than 64,000 pounds of a European-style butter blend off the market after the FDA upgraded its classification to a Class 2 recall. The reason was deceptively simple. The packaging failed to disclose that the product contained milk. Not a small typo, an undeclared allergen that can send vulnerable people into anaphylaxis. What makes this story sting is the scale. Bunge is one of the world's largest agribusinesses with operations in more than 40 countries and revenues running into tens of billions. This isn't a cottage creamery making an honest mistake. This is an industrial giant leveraging loopholes to move product faster and cheaper. Each recall becomes just another line item on a spreadsheet absorbed as the cost of doing business. Regulations technically exist to prevent this. The Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act was designed to make sure every product clearly states when it contains one of the 8 major allergens. Yet the system allows voluntary recalls to be framed as proactive rather than a failure, muting the outrage and minimizing scrutiny. Companies use that breathing room to keep distribution humming while quietly pulling stock from warehouses. Shoppers at home rarely know how close they came to eating something that could have landed them in the emergency room. This is where the numbers get uncomfortable. The CDC estimates that more than 32 million Americans have food allergies. Of those, around 4 million are allergic to milk. A single bite of an undeclared allergen can trigger a cascade of reactions within minutes. When a butter product labeled as European style can slip past controls with no warning label, it raises questions about every other product in your cart. And the contamination here isn't limited to ingredients. It's also about trust. Consumers assume that higher-priced European or premium means safer, cleaner, more authentic. But the supply chains behind those labels are often as complex and opaque as the cheapest store brand. Large processors blend milk from multiple regions, sometimes multiple countries, before churning it into a single product. Paperwork can lag behind production. Labels can be printed in bulk before recipes are finalized. At each step, the chance for error grows. When a giant like Bunge mislabels a product, the ripple effects spread far beyond one batch of butter. Grocery stores scramble to pull inventory. Small bakeries and restaurants who buy in bulk are left with pallets they cannot use. Insurance claims spike. Prices inch upward to offset losses. Consumers lose another slice of faith in the food system, and many never even know why the item disappeared from the shelf. The recall also highlights how corporate messaging shapes perception. Press releases emphasize that no illnesses have been reported, creating a sense that the risk was theoretical. But that only means no one has connected a hospital admission to the butter yet. It doesn't mean it was harmless. It doesn't mean it was safe. The uncertainty lingers in every kitchen, in every lunchbox, in every breakfast plate. Think about what happens when such a massive supplier cuts corners. A labeling slip in a product this common is not just a one-off. It signals vulnerabilities across the system, overextended quality control teams, fragmented manufacturing lines, suppliers under pressure to meet quotas. The next error may not be an allergen. It could be contamination, adulteration, or something no one has tested for yet. And yet, like Land O'Lakes, Bunge benefits from anonymity and habit. People pick up European-style spreads expecting sophistication and quality. Few pause to wonder who actually makes it. Few realize the same company moving soybeans and palm oil through global ports is also packaging what they spread on their toast. This is the quiet danger of modern food. Not a dramatic headline, but an ongoing erosion of safety standards, hidden behind heritage fonts and imported-sounding names. The recall of 64,000 pounds was a flare in the dark, a glimpse of what lies underneath. The question left hanging is not whether Bunge will do it again, but how many others are already doing the same. Number 3. Cabot Creamery. Cabot Creamery built its name on a promise that sounds comforting. Farmer-owned, Vermont-based, words that wrap around the imagination like a warm blanket. But comfort is a dangerous thing when it lets problems slip by unnoticed. Earlier this year, inspectors found coliform bacteria in samples of Cabot butter taken directly from the plant floor. Coliform isn't some exotic, mysterious microbe. It's a well-known marker of fecal contamination, a signal that something in the production line has gone wrong, badly wrong. While the recall involved just over 1,700 pounds, the implications stretch much further than a single batch. This wasn't a voluntary recall driven by caution. It was a reaction to measurable bacteria presence. And while the USDA classified it as a Class 3 event, downplaying it as a non-threatening issue, anyone who understands food safety knows that coliform detection should never be treated lightly. Its presence suggests improper sanitation lapses in temperature control or contaminated equipment, all of which are preventable with proper oversight. Cabot has long leaned into its image as a cooperative of small dairy farmers. That branding resonates with consumers who are tired of industrialized food. But the truth behind the scenes is less pastoral. Over the years, Cabot expanded its manufacturing capacity and supply chains to meet nationwide demand. Butter that once came from a handful of local farms now flows through much more centralized production, and centralization brings risk. When one facility processes thousands of pounds per hour, one mistake can move quickly through the pipeline. Washing protocols that worked for small batches don't always scale. A single equipment failure can taint entire pallets. And food safety scale is not just a technical challenge, it's a vulnerability. The presence of coliform bacteria raises another concern that rarely gets discussed: detection delays. Butter is rarely tested before it leaves the plant. And by the time positive results return from a lab, much of the product has already entered the retail stream. For every contaminated block that gets flagged, others may have already melted into pans, pastries, and processed meals across the country. And then comes the public messaging. Companies in situations like this tend to follow a script. Use terms like "out of an abundance of caution," emphasize the small quantity involved, frame it as an isolated incident. The problem is consumers don't get to see the full audit reports. They don't know how long the bacteria was present before someone noticed. They don't know whether similar contamination occurred before and went undetected. The larger picture becomes harder to ignore. A butter brand celebrated for its wholesomeness is now tied to a contamination alert. And that alert, while small in scope, hints at structural fragility. One slip in a quality control routine. One overworked line technician. One cost-saving adjustment to cleaning schedules. And still, the package on the shelf looks exactly the same. This disconnect between image and reality is what allows these problems to continue. Marketing tells people they are buying something pure and personal, but behind the foil, the same pressures that compromise bigger brands are at work here too. The need to scale, the pressure to compete, the temptation to trim costs without blinking, and once again the burden falls on the buyer. To read between the lines, to keep up with recall notices buried in government bulletins, to second-guess the butter they thought they could trust. Cabot may still carry the charm of Vermont on its packaging, but charm doesn't sanitize machinery, and a farmer-owned label doesn't change what lab results show. The bacteria found wasn't speculative. It was present. The response wasn't proactive, it was reactive. And for consumers who care about what ends up in their meals, that distinction matters. Number 4, great value. Great value butter shows up in millions of carts every week. It's cheap, it's easy to find, it's on the shelves of nearly every Walmart in the country, and that's precisely why it matters so much. Because when something that common starts cutting corners, the consequences don't trickle, they flood. Back in May, independent lab tests published by a food quality watchdog revealed that certain batches of great value salted butter contained significantly lower butterfat content than federal standards require. That's not just a technical detail. Butterfat is the defining component of real butter. It determines how it cooks, how it tastes, and how it interacts with your body. When the butterfat drops too low, what you're buying is no longer legally allowed to be called butter. It becomes a spread. But on the packaging, still labeled as butter, still sold as if nothing changed. And this isn't just about technical purity, it's about economic deception. Consumers are paying full price for a diluted product. Families already stretched thin by rising food costs are unknowingly trading nutrition and quality for filler. While inflation hammers the grocery bill, shrinkflation slips in quietly. The stick of butter looks the same. The ingredients look similar. But inside it's less than you paid for. The real kicker: federal enforcement is limited. As long as a product hovers close to the legal line, oversight agencies rarely step in. They don't have the resources, they don't have the bandwidth, and major retailers know it. So instead of fixing the issue, the game becomes managing optics, adjusting labels, tweaking recipes just enough to stay under the radar. Meanwhile, the customer keeps losing ground. Walmart, the owner of the Great Value line, has never positioned itself as a champion of premium goods, but it has built trust on the promise of affordability. That promise, when undermined by deception, becomes something more sinister. It becomes predatory. Especially in food deserts where Great Value might be the only available option, quality cuts become a public health concern. What's more alarming is the ingredient variability across different regions. Food bloggers and watchdogs have noted that Great Value butter purchased in southern states sometimes contains additional emulsifiers and stabilizers not found in northern batches. That kind of inconsistency raises serious questions about supply chain integrity. Why is the same product formulated differently depending on zip code, and who gets the short end of that deal? Then comes the deeper systemic issue: vertical integration. Walmart owns the shelf space, the brand, and the price point. It can pressure suppliers to meet cost demands, even if it means sourcing lower-grade cream or adjusting production specs. And because the brand sits on its own shelf, in its own store, no competing watchdog is pushing back. It's a self-contained ecosystem where the only real loser is the shopper. The ripple effects are already visible. A recent online thread with over 20,000 interactions detailed customer complaints ranging from sour smells to curdled textures, all tied to recent batches of Great Value butter. And yet no recall, no press release, just quiet removals from certain stores and new packaging with different batch codes. In a market where butter has become a symbol of rising food costs and industrial shortcuts, Great Value isn't just cutting corners, it's reshaping expectations. And that shift, once it takes hold, is nearly impossible to reverse. Consumers grow used to less, to weaker flavors, to watery textures, to labels that say one thing but deliver another. And when that becomes the norm, even bad butter looks good by comparison. Number 5 challenge. In July, a batch of dairy from a major California processor tested positive for peroxide levels, nearly double the federal threshold. The lot was traced back to a butter production partner supplying one of the most recognizable premium brands in America. The findings: oxidized fats, chemical breakdown, and clear signs of poor storage during transport. And yet not a single word made it into the headlines. Challenge butter sits right in the middle of that silence. While shoppers picture rolling green pastures and fresh churned cream, what they're actually getting in growing frequency is butter, with a bitter aftertaste, compromised texture, and signs of early spoilage. This year alone, multiple complaints poured into food safety boards citing waxy residue, unusual smell, and mold-like discoloration just days after purchase. In nearly all cases, the packaging was intact, the dates were valid, and the brand trusted. Or at least it was. The deeper concern isn't just the butter going bad, it's how no one's talking about why it's happening. Because Challenge isn't a small local churn, it's a product built on a sprawling supply chain that runs through industrial dairy operations, central cooling hubs, long-haul trucks, and ambient storage rooms, many of which are already strained by a broken cold chain system in peak summer heat. And when that system slips, even slightly perishable goods, like butter, are the first to suffer. But here's what consumers aren't told. Early-stage oxidation doesn't always change the color or smell of butter. It can take weeks before rancidity becomes noticeable. In the meantime, oxidized fats can trigger gut inflammation, discomfort, or in some cases, allergic-style responses in sensitive groups. Yet the product still gets stocked, still gets scanned at checkout, still gets spread on morning toast, and once again, the branding shields the truth. Challenge leans hard on imagery of real dairy family farmers and heritage since 1916. But it's not just the logo that's old-fashioned, it's the regulatory loopholes too. Because labeling laws don't require disclosure of peroxide levels. They don't mandate temperature logs. They don't flag how long milk sat before it was churned. So unless a recall is triggered, the consumer stays in the dark. When a product like butter, one of the most basic unprocessed foods in the kitchen, gets tangled in these shortcuts, the implication is heavy. Because if even butter can't be trusted, what does that say about the rest of the grocery aisle? Challenge doesn't need to lie outright. It just has to stay quiet long enough for the issue to blow over. And in that silence, problems keep circulating one stick at a time. After everything we've seen so far, it's easy to feel like the whole dairy aisle has turned against us. Trust gets chipped away stick by stick, brand by brand. And maybe the scariest part is realizing how long it's been happening, without anyone saying a word. But here's the thing, not every name in this game has gone rotten. While some chase profit by gutting quality, a few have quietly held their ground, refusing to dilute, refusing to deceive. It's not about perfection, it's about principle. And in the next few minutes, we're going to show you which brands still deserve a place in your kitchen, and why that choice could be more powerful than you think. Number 1, Tillamook Extra Creamy Butter. While major brands stumble behind marketing smokescreens and supply chain shortcuts, one name has quietly climbed the ranks not by shouting louder, but by refusing to play the same game. Tillamook Extra Creamy Butter has become something of a quiet rebellion on the shelf. And in a year flooded with recalls, reformulations, and bitter surprises, it's one of the rare products that still holds the line. The stats speak for themselves. Tillamook operates as a farmer-owned cooperative, meaning they don't answer to Wall Street. They answer to the people milking the cows. That shift alone changes everything. Milk isn't outsourced. Butter isn't mass-packed through shadow contractors. Their cream is processed within 48 hours. Their butter fat levels consistently test above 82%, surpassing federal standards and rivaling premium European imports. And the result, a product that doesn't just taste richer, it is richer. But what makes Tillamook stand out isn't just what they include, it's what they refuse to allow in. No growth hormones, no artificial preservatives, no mass-blended milk from anonymous suppliers. And perhaps most crucial in this climate, no shortcuts. While competitors quietly diluted recipes or outsourced to meet demand, Tillamook capped their production instead. Stores across the Midwest reported shortages during the holidays, but that scarcity told its own story. They would rather lose sales than compromise sourcing. In a food system where compromise is baked into everything, where natural can mean chemically deodorized fats and real butter can hide shelf life boosters, this refusal to bend carries weight. It signals that not everyone has sold out. Not every company has joined the race to the bottom, and that matters. Because consumers are exhausted. They're tired of reading fine print, tired of watching once trusted brands unravel, tired of biting into food that tastes slightly wrong and wondering if it's them or the product. With Tillamook, that second-guessing stops. The cream tastes like cream. The butter spreads like butter. The label matches the flavor. It's not perfect. It costs more. It's not available everywhere. And it doesn't always come with flashy coupons. But in a market built on illusions, honesty becomes a form of luxury. And right now, that luxury might be one of the few things still worth paying for. Number 2, Kerrygold Pure Irish Butter. In an industry where even the definition of butter has quietly eroded, Kerrygold has managed to stay irritatingly consistent. Not flashy, not chasing trends, but stubbornly rooted in something America's food giants gave up chasing a long time ago: real ingredients that don't need defending. Every year, close to 400 million pounds of Kerrygold butter are exported, and not because of clever marketing. It's because the product behaves like food is supposed to behave. It melts evenly. It doesn't release watery film in the pan. It browns without burning. It holds flavor instead of absorbing fridge odors. And it doesn't need a paragraph of disclaimers to do so. At the center of it all is one unshakable detail: grass-fed sourcing. In Ireland, over 90% of dairy cows graze freely for up to 10 months a year. That grass-rich diet isn't about trends, it's about fat quality. The result: higher levels of conjugated linoleic acid, natural beta-carotene, and unsaturated fats that actually behave like food in your body, not shelf-stabilized filler. But here's what most consumers don't realize. Kerrygold has fought harder than most to keep their product clean. Years ago, several states tried to block it from entering grocery chains, due to labeling regulations around milk pasteurization. Instead of caving or reformulating, Kerrygold doubled down on its standards and refused to compromise to meet looser American definitions. The product didn't change. The policies had to bend. That kind of resistance in today's market is almost unheard of. Most brands race to meet the cheapest version of legality. Kerrygold forced the rules to catch up to them. And while other butters now resemble oil spread hybrids packed with palm blends and shelf life tricks, Kerrygold has become a quiet control group. A product that lets you feel what butter used to be before profit logic rewrote the formula. It isn't perfect. It ships internationally, so there's an environmental cost to acknowledge. And yes, depending on where you live, it might run almost double the price of domestic brands. But if the choice is between paying more or ingesting rebranded margarine pretending to be dairy, the cost speaks for itself. In a landscape of asterisks and footnotes, Kerrygold remains stubbornly whole. That doesn't make it a miracle. But in today's food system, consistency might be the rarest ingredient of all. After everything unraveled today, one thing should be clear by now. The problem isn't just bad butter. It's a system that lets it slide through cracks wide enough to swallow entire supply chains. Brands once trusted have quietly changed hands, changed recipes, and changed priorities, and somehow we're the last to know. But maybe that's the point. If we're not watching, they don't have to explain. The good news, we still have choices. And every choice we make sends a signal louder than any label ever could. So whether it's what we buy, what we stop buying, or what we finally start questioning, that decision doesn't just stay on the shelf. It lands on the plate. Every single time.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage segregation. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today analyzes made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.